Y&R Spoilers reveal the storm of the Newman family is not only rooted in traditional ambitions for power, but this time it erupts from a deadly secret held by an outsider. When Aristotle Dumas quietly appeared in Genoa City, no one in the Newman family suspected that he was the one holding Victor Newman's fate in the palm of his hand. Like a patient predator, Dumas did not rush to strike. He silently collected evidence, recording the moments when Victor revealed his true face behind the mask of power. Dumas did not need to shout to let Victor know that he was firmly holding the balance of power. A recording, a photo, a few archives, everything Dumas possessed were sharp knives aimed straight at Victor, threatening to expose everything to the media and the law. The crimes that Victor had hidden behind the thick wall of fame and money were no longer out of control. In the moment of confrontation, Victor, who once made so many people tremble, became a trembling prey before the silent but ruthless predator. Dumas set a condition: without mercy, either Victor would obey his every command, or all dirty secrets would be brought to light. Victor, despite his iron will, was finally forced to accept standing on the edge. He tried to suppress his anger, but could not hide his panic when he knew that he no longer held his destiny in his hands. For the first time in decades, Victor had to beg another person, had to bow his head to agree to all the conditions, even though they went against his self-respect and philosophy of life. For Victor, this was humiliation, an unprecedented humiliation. But facing the risk of complete collapse, he was forced to swallow his anger, follow Dumas' every command, even though he knew that each step only brought him closer to the abyss. But what Victor had to face did not stop with Dumas. The inner turmoil, the pressure of being manipulated, and the humiliation of being controlled turned Victor into a different person. He was no longer the cold symbol of control, but became a man who lost control, constantly making irreparable mistakes. The Newman family, once Victor's most secure kingdom, now became a place where he sowed chaos and doubt. Victor's shadow was too large, and when he collapsed, it dragged everyone around him into a vortex of chaos. Relatives who had once wholeheartedly protected and even idolized Victor, could no longer recognize him. The climax of the chaos was when Michael Baldwin, his longtime friend and last ally, also chose to leave, leaving Victor alone, with no one able to control his anger. Without Michael, Victor gradually slid down the path of self-destruction. He plunged into uncontrolled confrontations, attacking Jack Abbott, his lifelong enemy, not only with psychological attacks but also with physical force and vicious revenge. Kyle Abbott, who used to be a strategic ally, now becomes an unwilling victim when Victor takes all his anger out on him, despite the dissuasion from those around him. Victor doesn't stop at Jack and Kyle, he also targets Billy Abbott, turning him into a new enemy just to satisfy his endless rage. The Newman family can't stand by and watch. When Victor continues to hurt people who used to be friends, partners, and members of the powerful business family, they begin to question whether Victor has crossed the line. Nikki Newman painfully witnesses the man she once loved passionately now only a shadow of himself, no longer able to control himself. Victoria Newman, the heiress that Victor once placed all his hopes on, now becomes an unwilling opponent, when she realizes that if she doesn't act, the whole family will be engulfed by Victor's madness. The biggest question now is whether the family can stand together against Victor, a man who is used to having all the power in his hands. They must choose between family loyalty and their own safety, between love and reason, between the glorious past and the cruel reality. Meanwhile, Victor has created a new wave of chaos by deliberately interfering in the relationship between Claire Grace Newman and Kyle Abbott. Realizing that Claire, the newly adopted niece of the family, is getting closer to Kyle, Victor sees in this a potential threat to Newman's power. He does not hesitate to secretly plan to separate them, using every means to protect what remains of his personal power. To do this, Victor does not hesitate to assign Audra Charles, a smart but ambitious woman, a secret mission, to sow doubt and conflict, to destroy the trust between Claire and Kyle before their relationship can become a real threat. Victor Newman, a symbol of power and intrigue, who has repeatedly led his family and corporation through storms, is now caught in an unprecedented spiral of revenge. As time passes, the wounds and hatred that have smoldered within Victor not only do not subside but also flare up more and more strongly, leading to reckless decisions that shock the entire Genoa City. In particular, those who have been hurt by Victor, old enemies who seem to have settled down, now have to be wary as his anger flares up like an uncontrollable fire. The only person who has ever been able to restrain Victor is Michael Baldwin, a longtime friend, companion, and the only anchor that keeps Victor from falling deeper into the abyss of hatred. But everything changes when Michael leaves that position, leaving Victor to face his own darkness with no one left to stop him. The atmosphere at the Newman mansion becomes more stifling than ever. Nikki Newman, the devoted wife who has been with him through many events, feels increasingly helpless. Nikki understands her husband better than anyone. She realizes that Victor is no longer himself. He is blinded by fear, anger, and revenge obsession. Without Michael as a support, Nikki is increasingly confused by her husband's increasingly out-of-control actions. She has repeatedly advised and tried to calm Victor's anger, but now, every word is like a small needle in a storm, unable to stop Victor from rushing into endless and reckless revenge. Nikki witnesses her husband become a different person. The man she loved, once steady and calm, is now just a shadow threatened by obsession and fear. Dumas, with his quiet but dangerous appearance, is the cause of fanning the flames of insecurity in Victor. This person not only possesses deadly secrets about Victor, but is also wise and cold enough to turn them into knives always hovering over his head. Every day that passed, Victor lived in extreme fear, not knowing when those secrets would be exposed, not knowing how to control someone like Dumas, who seemed to have no weaknesses, did not care about money or power, only liked to control others through fear and pressure. For Victor, this was more terrible than business wars or direct sabotage plots, because Dumas did not play by the rules he was used to. No one in the family understood the level of stress that was gradually suffocating Victor like Michael did. When he was still by Victor's side, Michael Baldwin was not only an excellent lawyer, but also a confidant, a pillar of reason. Michael always knew how to soothe his boss, always used his sobriety and sharp judgment to prevent Victor from making rash, hasty decisions. Whenever Victor was about to rush into a new fight, Michael was often the one to pull him back, offer more reasonable solutions, or at least help him buy time to reconsider the problem. Sometimes, Michael was like a little angel whispering in Victor's ear, reminding him that revenge only brings destruction, that true power lies not in defeating the enemy but in the ability to control oneself. However, after Michael left, that restraint also disappeared. With no one to hold Victor back from the brink, he gradually sank deeper into his own darkness. Revenge happened continuously, without thinking about the consequences, without caring about the relationships that had been built over the years. Nikki painfully witnessed her husband drifting further and further away from reality. The more she tried to control him, the more she realized that she was completely powerless. Sometimes, Nikki felt afraid of the very man she had once put her life into. Their conversations became tense, and every piece of Nikki's advice was brushed aside by Victor, even becoming an excuse for him to vent his anger. Nikki had no choice but to pray, hoping for a miracle to bring Victor back. Meanwhile, Victor lived in constant vigilance, haunted by Dumas like a shadow that never left. He felt besieged both in his mind and in reality, every decision stemming from the fear of losing everything. Victor became suspicious of everyone around him, even his closest loved ones. He only believed in his own strength, ignoring advice, even family affection. Victor constantly planned revenge, as a way to reassure himself that he was still in control of his destiny. But the more he attacked, the lonelier he felt, the more he lost control. His rage was no longer directed at his enemies, but began to spread to his friends, relatives, anyone who expressed doubt or did not follow his will. Without Michael by his side, Victor was more vulnerable to spiraling into revenge and self-destruction. Nikki was increasingly pushed to the edge of Victor's life. She could do nothing but watch the man she loved sink deeper and deeper into darkness. She had once thought that her love was strong enough to change Victor, but now, Nikki felt completely helpless, even hopeless. On the other side, Michael, despite leaving his role as Victor's assistant and lawyer, still silently monitored the situation. He knew that Victor was gradually losing control, knew that his former boss would soon bring disaster upon himself if no one intervened. Michael had considered returning to help Victor many times, but also understood that if he did not recognize his own limits, no one could help. Michael continued to choose to be an observer, sometimes sending hidden messages, hoping that Victor could wake up. But all efforts became hopeless before Victor's stubbornness and growing fear. The situation became worse when Victor's revenge was not only limited to his enemies but also extended to those who were once friends, allies, and even relatives. Victor could no longer control the line between hatred and affection, between justice and revenge, between protection and destruction. Nikki, in her sleepless nights, often wondered whether she should leave Victor to save herself, or continue to stay, hoping that one day her beloved husband would return from the abyss. Finally, Victor had to face a stark reality: no one could save him but himself. Michael's departure, Nikki's disappointment and pain, the turning away of those who were once loyal, all resonated into a wake-up call, forcing Victor to look back. But before he realized it, he had pushed his family and himself to the brink of collapse, leaving behind wounds that would not heal in everyone's hearts. In a city where loyalty, hatred, and power go hand in hand, Victor Newman now stands as a tragic example of the price of losing control, of letting hatred guide him instead of reason and love. And whether someone comes back to help him, whether Michael reaches out once more, or Nikki continues to wait patiently, only when Victor truly accepts change can the darkness in his mind be lifted, and the light of hope return to the Newman family. The atmosphere in the Newman mansion is filled with tension and hidden conflicts, although on the outside everything is still maintained under the flashy, polite appearance of one of the most powerful families in Genoa City. However, behind closed doors, confrontations, confidences, conspiracies, and even secret fears are happening at an increasingly intense pace. Nikki Newman is still constantly troubled when she realizes that Victor is increasingly showing too much control over the lives of family members, especially when he targets the budding relationship between Claire and Kyle. Nikki clearly feels uneasy in her heart when she sees Victor secretly influencing and intervening to create a rift between two young people who need the support and tolerance of their family more than anything else. Nikki herself knows very well that just one thoughtless decision from Victor can permanently destroy the trust and love for each other that they have worked so hard to rebuild. Nikki's insecurities could no longer be hidden, so she chose to confide in Victoria, the mature, strong daughter who had experienced the most pain from Victor's control. Nikki carefully chose her words when talking about her fear that Victor would ruin Claire and Kyle's happiness, because she knew better than anyone that Victoria was always wary of her father's every move. The story was told in the soft yellow light, in an atmosphere filled with sadness, anxiety, and unspoken sympathy. Nikki did not want Victoria to rebel, she only hoped that her daughter could restrain Victor once more, before things went too far. But that confession stirred up an undercurrent that was just waiting to explode in Victoria's heart. All the years, the broken marriages, the broken relationships that could not be saved, the times her heart was broken because of her father's harsh intervention, all those painful memories had never slept. Now, as Victoria watched Victor continue to make the same mistakes, she no longer had the patience or forgiveness. She knew that if she did not speak up, Claire, her sister who had just reunited after many storms, who was timidly building her own future, would be the next victim. Victoria felt responsible for protecting Claire, for ending the series of tragedies that Victor had always allowed himself to impose on his children's lives. That very night, Victoria did not hesitate to confront her father. She entered Victor's office, carrying in her heart a mixture of anger and despair that only those who had experienced the feeling of being betrayed by their loved ones could understand. Victoria's words were resolute, no longer beating around the bush, no longer maintaining any courtesy between father and daughter. She warned her father that if he dared to destroy the relationship between Claire and Kyle, if he continued to impose his power over Claire's life, she would never forgive him. Tension spread throughout the room, each sentence, each word was like a cold knife, stabbing straight into the illusion of control that Victor had always built for himself. Victor, who was used to having every member of the family submit to his iron will, this time facing a determined Victoria, he couldn't help but be confused. Deep down, he knew Victoria was right. He had violently interfered in almost all of her relationships, and the result was irreparable brokenness, times when Victoria had to rise from the ashes caused by her own father. Victor used to think he did it out of love, because he wanted to protect his daughter from harm. But every time he looked back, he realized that he had unintentionally become the one who caused Victoria the most pain. And now, when he saw Claire, his niece who had just found a home, being caught up in that vortex of control, Victor knew he was repeating the same mistakes. But he couldn't stop, because of the feeling of insecurity, the fear of losing the people he loved, the obsession that if he didn't control, the whole family would fall apart again. Victoria wasn't just angry. She was also seething with the will to protect Claire at all costs, to stop her father before it was too late. She told herself that even if she had to confront him, even if she had to pay the price of their relationship, she would not let Claire suffer the pain she had experienced. Victoria decided that this time she would not back down, would not compromise, would not accept any more interference. Claire deserved the chance to love and choose happiness, not to become a victim of the controlling ambition or invisible fears of her predecessors. Claire, who grew up under the strict and manipulative control of her Aunt Jordan Howard, knows very well what psychological restraint is. Her childhood was without freedom, without choice, only knowing how to obey orders and living in constant fear. That is why, when she begins to build feelings for Kyle, the only person who helps her find peace, Claire wishes to have the opportunity to make her own decisions, to listen to her own heart, to be loved without being imposed or controlled by anyone, including Victor. Victor's approval is especially meaningful, but Claire does not want to repeat the tragedy that Victoria once endured. She is smart enough to realize that if she continues to let her grandfather guide all her decisions, her future will be no different from another Newman family mistake. From the outside, Kyle clearly feels the pressure that Claire is under. He loves Claire, wants to protect her from family troubles, but also knows that he cannot fight alone without the support of Victoria and Nikki. Kyle stands on a thin line, wanting to prove his love, while being wary of Victor's calculations and control, a man who has never easily let anyone out of his control, especially when that person is the future of the family. During this time, Victor's every move is closely observed by Victoria. She is ready to confront, ready to publicly criticize her father in front of the whole family if necessary. The atmosphere in the Newman mansion becomes heavier than ever, everyone clearly feels the discord waiting to erupt at any moment. Nikki is increasingly worried when seeing the relationship between father and eldest daughter become tense, while Claire is pushed into the middle, not knowing how to choose to maintain peace without losing herself. Victor, despite always appearing strong and invincible, is actually feeling lonelier than ever. He cannot express his fear of losing his children, grandchildren, and losing his central position in the family. The more he tries to control, the more he realizes that he is pushing his family members further away from his arms, making family happiness more and more fragile. But because of that, Victor is even more determined not to compromise, not to accept anyone who goes against his will, whether it is his wife who loves him wholeheartedly or his daughter who always longs to make him proud. Everything is heading towards a fateful turn, where endurance, love, and even hurt will be tested to the extreme. No one can stand outside this war, each member is forced to choose whose side to stand on, ready to face consequences that may never be repaired. And most of all, will Claire be strong enough to decide her own future, or will she have to suffer the same tragedy from her loved ones? The storm in the Newman family has never been so fierce. As power, passion, history, and ambition collide, in the blink of an eye, everything could collapse, or a new chapter could be written for the family, driven by the determination, courage, and desire to live authentically of the younger generation. Under the final party lights, Victor stands silently, no longer a symbol of invincibility, but simply a man facing the fear of losing everything. The question remains: will he change, learn to let go, or continue to be stubborn and lose himself and those he loves the most? And perhaps only time will tell, but it is certain that after that night, the Newman family will never be the same again because they have learned to stand up for their happiness, even when facing the head of the family.